back to Rating the List, where we review, discuss, and reimagine popular movie lists objectively. We're your hosts. I'm Jerry.
And I'm Brad. And on this episode, we'll be exploring number 55 from AFI's 100 Years, 100 Passions, the 100 Greatest Love Stories of All Time.
All right, number 55 is Reds, written and directed by Warren Beatty, starring Warren Beatty and Diane Keaton, and released in 1981.
So, the synopsis for this historical biopic is as follows. In 1915, married journalist and suffragist Louise Bryant, played by Diane Keaton, encounters radical journalist John Reed, Warren Beatty, and becomes intrigued by his idealism. After meeting with him for an interview on international politics that lasts an entire night, she realizes that writing has been her only escape from her frustrated existence. Inspired to leave her husband and life in Portland, Oregon, she joins Reed in Greenwich Village and becomes acquainted with the local community of activists and artists, including anarchist author Emma Goldman, played by Maureen Stapleton, and playwright Eugene O'Neill, played by Jack Nicholson. Later, they move to Provincetown, Massachusetts to concentrate on their writing and become involved in the local theater scene. Through her writing, Bryant becomes a feminist and radical in her own right. Reed becomes involved in labor strikes with the Reds of the Communist Labor Party of America. Obsessed with changing the world, he grows restless and travels to St. Louis to cover the 1916 Democratic Convention. During Reed's absence, Bryant falls into a complicated affair with O'Neill. Upon his return, Reed learns of the affair and realizes he still loves her. The two marry secretly and return to New York. When Reed admits his own infidelities, Bryant leaves for Europe to become a war correspondent. After a flare-up of a kidney disorder, Reed is warned to avoid stress and travel. He ignores the advice and heads to Europe. Reunited as professionals, Reed and Bryant find their passions reignited as they are swept up in the 1917 Russian Revolution. Inspired by the revolution, Reed attempts to bring the spirit of communism home because he is disillusioned by the policies instituted by the Bolsheviks. While attempting to leave, he is imprisoned in Finland. He is returned to Russia and reunited with Bryant at a Moscow train station. By this point, Reed is growing progressively weaker as a result of spotted typhus. Bryant helps nurse Reed, who eventually dies.
This movie was really good. It was good.
The thing that really works, and it was interesting, I found out a little bit more about it, was interspersed with, like, this movie takes place over the course of about 2.5 years, and each time, like, they move to, like, the next thing that happens, like, anytime there's, like, a historical kind of spark point that happens that kind of changes the direction of what they're doing in their lives, they bring forth actual people who were interviewed. They're called the witnesses.
That's
and
right.
People that were involved either in the thing that was happening at the time or knew Reed and Bryant. So these are people
so this was based on a true story.
Yeah, these are two real people, so it's it's inspired by true events, and I think the witnesses really ground the story, and I think he does it in a really smart way to let people who may not be really knowledgeable about what was happening in terms of American politics, in terms of international politics at the time. Kind of gives them a gateway to understanding what Reed's motivations are, what Bryant's motivations are, all of that, and what's kind of happening in the world. We're in the middle of World War I here, the Bolshevik Revolution. We're on the cusp of women, getting the right to vote. There's a lot going on right in this time period, and these two people are very involved in both of those things.
And saying that, in my opinion, the love story of this movie gets kind of drowned out with what's going on.
Yeah. It's almost
politically.
like it's just kind of floats on the sea of this story
yes,
a little bit.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's touching, and you do feel their chemistry and their love for each other, and how it's very temperamental along with the political climate.
Yeah.
But I don't think that we get enough of the love story to really say this is a love story.
I don't think we get enough of the love story to ground them either.
No.
Apparently, I didn't realize this, but they were dating at the time.
Oh, Warren Beatty and Diane Keaton. So,
it kind of makes sense. And it's
because they have some good fight scenes.
And I from what I understand, it was a very, very stressful shoot. So, in the midst of this, they're, basically like the way that he was directing this movie, and he almost had kind of Reed's kind of obsession with getting this movie made. So he first came across Reed the person like in the early 60s. And he was really, really interested in the story. He became really interested in it, and he wrote like the first script for this movie like in like 1966 or something like that.
Wow, yeah.
And he spent a really long time trying to get this movie off the ground. And he was actually approached. I guess there's a Russian film that covers Reed's life story as well.
Okay.
He was actually approached to play Reed in that movie.
Oh,
a
interesting.
few years. I don't know exactly what it's called, but it was a few years before. He kind of sat down and came up with what eventually came on screen. It was just like 1973 or something like that. But he refused it because he wanted to do it. Eventually, he had some successes as both on-screen presence and also as a producer. Gave him enough clout that he could kind of tackle this passion project, that's pretty typical in Hollywood. What generally you'll see happen is someone who has some dimension to them, but maybe they aren't taken super seriously. Like a great example, we've talked about him before, is George Clooney. So George Clooney is kind of seen as a very classic leading man type. But he also has a lot of interests, and his interests tend to be for smaller kinds of pictures. So he has kind of taken his superstar clout and used that to get behind smaller pictures. Brad Pitt is he has produced so many small pictures that you would be surprised, like just movies you wouldn't anticipate that he'd be.
There was one we just watched that was produced by him.
He has all kind. He puts his name to all kinds of projects.
Yeah, it's really cool.
12 Years a Slave.
Yep.
He's the producer on that. So he uses his clout to make sure these movies get made. And that's a pretty common thing in Hollywood, is the point where your box office appeal is such that you can use it to make your passion projects. Typically that's what happens. That's when you see someone usually like kind of at the apex of their career, they take on a movie like Reds. And that's what Warren Beatty does here, is he's finally able to get this project that he's wanted to work on for like a good 15 years at that point. He finally gets it off the ground. So this movie was like the Oscar movie of the year. I think it was nominated for 11 or 12 Oscars.
I mean, well deserved.
Yeah.
It was a very good, well put together movie.
Yeah, it lost to Picture, to Chariots of Fire. He won for director. Maureen Stapleton won for Best Supporting Actress. What else won for this movie? There's a few other things. It won like 4 Oscars. Diane Keaton, Warren Beatty, and Jack Nicholson were also nominated for actor, actress, and Best Supporting Actor.
Jack Nicholson in this movie.
Yeah, he plays Eugene O'Neill, who was a real playwright, and he had an affair with
Diane Keaton's character.
With Bryant.
Yeah.
One of the things we kind of talked about when we just finished watching the movie is there's a scene where she's kind of on the fence about going overseas to be a war correspondent, and he's kind of calling her on her shit, like, who is Warren Beatty's character?
Okay, yeah.
He's basically like, basically like kind of calling her out. You're not a real journalist because you're doing all these like fluff pieces which are well beneath your ability. And at that time, that's when they're kind of talking about the affair with O'Neill, and he kind of throws out that he's had affairs, and we both kind of came to the same consensus that he was lying about it. Like, he didn't actually have
they got into this big fight because he found out that she had an affair with Eugene O'Neill, and he was like, well, I had affairs all the time, basically, like. Yeah. But we think that he just said that because he was so hurt that he wanted her to be hurt too.
I've thought about it a little bit more. I think that's part of it, but I also think that he did it to spur her to take the role where she's going to be a war correspondent, like to send her away. Like, that was how he was able to get her.
Like, don't be here for me. Like, yeah.
So wow. I mean, those aspects of the love story are actually pretty compelling. Where one of the cool things about his character is for 1915, he's like super progressive in his views on women. Mm-hmm. He really truly sees her as an equal. Yes. Like, he believes in her abilities to the point where he calls her out on her shit quite regularly. Mm-hmm. And not like in a male chauvinistic kind of way.
No, like, hey, you could be doing so much more than what you're doing.
Yeah, it's a really good movie. It's a little bit on the long side. It actually, like, if you watch it, it actually has an intermission in it, which
it's like 3 hours.
It's like 3.5 hours long. It's pretty long, but it actually moves fairly quickly. It's really epic in scope. Definitely worth a watch. Even though the love story is kind of muted by the rest of what's going on, it's really, really worth a watch. I hadn't seen this in a number of years.
Yeah, it was good.
And it was interesting to revisit it, especially as someone who's a little bit older who, can appreciate, history a little bit more, and especially now that kind of Russia is kind of back in the news, on the international stage, and kind of potentially, on the, international stage again for the same kinds of things. Yeah. So I gave this one a 65. You gave this one a 66. So the list score is 65 and a half. So.
And remember, we're ranking this based on the love story. Yeah. So, like I said, I think this movie is phenomenal, but the love story isn't as strong as what it should be, I think, for this list.
Yeah, this one's probably on the cusp of ending up on our 100 list. If it does, it'd be probably in the 90s, based on kind of where we're scoring some of the stuff on the side list and also some of the stuff on this list. So it's a good movie, definitely worth a watch. Definitely would recommend seeing it. So
okay, so please comment, please like and subscribe if you're enjoying our content. We would appreciate that. If you'd like to email us, please email us at ratingthelist@gmail.com. We're Rating the List. I'm Jerry.
And I'm Brad.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.